I think before we start, maybe a quick opening comment on what you think is the future of fintech in the current context where there's a lot of changes on the regulation side. The arbitrage is gone. We had regulator getting speaking about their involvement and helping the ecosystem as well. We've seen a lot of innovations going bit positive, a bit negative. We have also seen a lot of companies scaling up a lot. In last few years, we have almost, maybe 3-4 years, we have almost $14-15 billion entering the country, and a lot of still is in the progress of getting executed. So I think there are a lot of positives and a lot of negatives. It's a mixed bag. Normally, I come back and do fintech predictions. This year, I'm not done. 99% I would get it wrong. So I left it. So I left it to these senior guys to tell us what's going to happen now and what should be early stage maybe startups think. So I'll request for an opening remark from you.
I think fintech future to khali fintech ka hi hai. Everybody wants to be fintech. Banks want to be fintech. NPCI wants to be fintech. So I think the fintech is going to be the story. And on the other side, I think the democratization of the large digital public infrastructure which country is building, whether it's some of the platforms of NPCI, Aadhaar, ONDC, OCAIN, account aggregators. So I think the opportunity for the startups, fintechs, is very high in my assessment because it gives a kind of a level playing field to get access. I think that's very important from a fintech standpoint. The funding situation is a little bit bad today, but I'm sure that's a cycle. It's a cycle,
Right.
It's a cycle and it'll improve. So I think everybody wants to be fintech. So it's a fintech story ahead, next 10 years.
Excellent. And I think sometimes a winter is always useful, right? You will also know how to conserve energy, right? Yeah.
So just borrowing from Dilip, I think as well that fintech future is very, very promising, especially in a country like India. And this is because of 3-4 things that we are noticing as a trend. One, the consumer expectation itself is changing from what was okay in India earlier versus what is okay today is very different. We are into instant gratification now, immediate. And that can only be driven using technology for financial services. So consumer is demanding a lot more. And in terms of the provisioning that is happening in the industry today, there is a gap that has to be filled. Samir spoke about why should there be a 30-minute cooling period? Why should we be doing trade where documents arrive after 48 hours? All these are gaps. This has to be filled up immediately. The second important thing, and which is very particular to India, is that we have digital public goods which are getting created. And Dilip himself is creating a phenomenal digital public good for this country. And there are lots of work happening in account aggregator, Open. I see Rishikesh here, he's sitting as well. So all these are going to democratize financial services for the citizens of this country. We could offer earlier loans at a certain price point, at a certain size, in a certain time. Now we are talking about funding a street vendor at night so that that person can be able to fulfill working capital requirement and just return the money in a matter of few hours. This is only possible with the digital public goods that India is investing in. So this is phenomenal and it's very particular to India, and I think we are blessed to be in a country like this where so much of work is happening. The third important thing is that there is a partnership framework which is emerging now. We have a regulator who is very, very progressive, is clearly defining what is doable, what's not doable, what are the roles and responsibilities. And this clarity helps in a big way. So the more clear it is, the roles definitions for each of the participants, they can wholeheartedly participate in a development like this. So I think it's very, very promising. The fintech partnership in India and the fintech future in India is very promising.
Thank you. Is it audible? It is okay, yeah. Nirav, actually you represent fintech ecosystem here, right? Because others are from different background. You are the fintech guy and you're doing very well, right?
I was about to say that as an incumbent fintech, we are always very, very optimistic. But I think what Dilip said and what Anjani said was very relevant where the India stack is concerned. I think that's been a game changer. What's really exciting for me is the globalization now of the India stack, right? And this going away outside. And I think that creates a lot of global opportunities for incumbent fintech players here in India. Of course, India is an extremely large market, especially creating credit access to MSMEs and all of that. But I think this creates a level playing field for us to operate globally, which is very exciting. So I think the next 2 decades would be certainly, will certainly belong to the fintech industry in India.
And then we will not be able to define who's a bank and who's a fintech, and maybe
Well, I
NPCI
think
is
we'll
also
always be able to define who a bank and who a fintech is, and that's how it should be. I think no fintech can operate as a silo. It needs to partner with incumbent financial institutions and banks, and we take that as a primary mode of operation for us. And it's worked really well, and it's worked really well for both the fintech and the financial institutions. So I don't see that changing. But I see growth happening as a partnership rather than as a silo going forward.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you. Sandeep, आप बहुत ही boring business में and in that what you have done is amazing, right? So from a affordable housing finance structure to building the digital within that, I think you have done a fab job. So what's your perspective? And because you are neither here nor there, you are saying that only fintechs and the banks will be different, but I think your entity has both the things put together. So आपका perspective बताइए.
Hey, thanks, Amir, for having me here. I think it's a very challenging time for the ecosystem. But the way I would look at it is 2-3 things. If you look at the first aspect, you look at the population of India, I think a large part of the world is here. And all the people and all the fintech and whatever we talk about today is for an addressable target market. So even if you look at, say, banks, there would be, 3.5 lakh bank branches in India today? So if you look at delivery models, I think what Dilip said about the infrastructure that's been created is truly unique. So if you have to go beyond what is bankable or banked, or what all of us are doing is scratching the surface on penetration. So I guess if you go to the next billion, it's all about the delivery models, the collaborations, the partnerships. And I do believe that there is a limitation to whatever we do today in the models that have got us here. Because I think the power of voice, because literacy is a big challenge.
I agree.
And I think the ability for people to key in items on the phone is what is driving a lot of stuff. But that target market is limited beyond a point in India. And that is evolving with the age and the younger generation. And if you look at the feature phones versus the smartphones, I think that number has gone up quite a bit. But like many other markets, it'll peak out. So I think the delivery models have to be friendly to the target market. So when I used to work in banks, we used to only lend to the top end of the mass affluent. We would always celebrate that, yeah, this is what India is. But if you break up the country into the top 6-7 cities, the next 40, the next 200, 300, and actually look beyond the obvious, I think there is a massive amount of population which is very high on learnability, adaptability, and making things happen. So I remember I used to work for Barclays Bank. We did a pilot on mobile banking, I think in 2007 and 8, with very different technology than what's available today. So I think we burned a lot of money at that point of time. But what you see today on that ecosystem is truly phenomenal. So I think 3 things that will stand out will be, how do you reach the last mile? And how do you create the delivery pipes to do that? And how do you have an enabling ecosystem to leverage the infrastructure that's been built? So I think the roads have been paved by the government and people like NPCI and a lot of others. So I think it's about making sure that we do this, and the regulations, I think, large part has played out. So I think there are profitable modes, and India is like 30 different countries. So if you can actually pick up a few pieces and put this together, and you put the customer at the center of it, and build a product or a delivery model, and test it with the customer before launching it, then there'll be a lot more success. So I think that would be the key. And in my view, I think the next big hurdle for scalability is delivery through voice and a few other models.
No, I agree, and to the extent focusing on Bharat, right? I think that's what will work. So I think, Rahul, from your perspective, you represent the investor community here, right? In this panel, you are the only investor, and you are the guys who are actually fueling the whole ecosystem, right? So what's your perspective? What's going to happen next?
Thanks, Samir. So, look, I think it's important to keep things in context. I've been involved in the, I guess, fintech space for 17 years now. Wrote the first check to BillDesk back in 2005. Got involved with Equitas in 2010. Got involved with companies like MobiQuick a few years later. After that, Zest, Kish, pick your favorite, fintech. So we've been involved for a long time. And I think, in a way, I would say, fintech 1.0 is dead. Long live fintech 2.0, right? Because I think we're moving into a much more regulated environment. And I think some of the cowboy behavior, that followed some of the actions in the last few years, will be checked now. So I think one, we should recognize that the payments and credit and insurtech and wealth tech infrastructure has come a very long way in 17 years. I think the biggest challenge is we have such high expectations of ourselves for innovation, right? I mean, the pace that this industry moves at is staggering, right? And I think from an investor standpoint, I think we're trying to take the long view and saying, okay, where will this go in the next 10 years? So I think there's a little bit of a peaking of activity in credit. I think you'll see that from a financial investor standpoint, if you're not a scaled credit player, then chances are it's going to be hard to raise fresh capital. But I think the attention of investors is moving into other verticals. So I think you'll hear a lot about insurtech. I think you'll hear a lot about wealth tech and invest tech. And of course, there is this rising tide of opportunity of just enabling infrastructure, right? So providing technology to all these players. So I think, the prospects are very bright. I think we need to pace ourselves. And India is always going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So I think from our standpoint, the glass is always half full.
Okay. Thank you. So Dilip, normally fintech is an independent ecosystem we think about, but the impact on the economy is humongous, right? The kind of impact maybe on GST collection itself, because it's linked to amount of digital payments which happen. So how do you correlate the relationship between growth of fintech and growth of economy, and what are the other steps which fintechs can take which will fuel the economy as well?
So when you look at, I think the financial services, and then there is a money man here, so he should guide us actually on this question. But I think the super low penetration on credit, insurance, and investments, I think while the payments have created a good base in that sense, maybe about 300 million, and still about 250 to 300 million people are eligible to come on the payments bandwagon. It creates a good 500 million customer base, which is ready to look at the credit, investments, and the insurance, right? So I think it's a great story ahead in my assessment next 10 years. Obviously, goes without saying, as I said, that being compliant, being when you are into the because all the payments and all the 3 businesses are highly regulated businesses for right reasons. So I think the fintechs will have to look at the compliance, risk management, and those kind of things while they continue to build the business model. But I think it's a great 10-year runway into this financial services business, and I'm sure that Indian, and as Nirav said, the global interoperability is also kicking in now. I think that's another big growth opportunity for the fintechs in India, because they have proven the metal scale in India, and I think the next logical step is look at and follow where the government alliances, the G20 advantage, what the country is going to take. I think that's the next logical move.
Okay. Maybe a linked question, not linked question, but आपके साथ बैठा हूँ तो पूछ ही लेता हूँ. अभी UPI हो गया, सब लोग दुनिया में देख रहे हैं, right? Everybody is focused and looking at India. Now, what is India looking at? What is the next? Because it's not going to come from other countries. What you are going to build is the next one version of payments. What more can be planned? What more may not be on the plan, but can be thought about in future on the payment side?
So from our perspective, I think India is still not fully penetrated or saturated. So our objective is to grow 10x payments from where we are. Our objective is look at how we can aid credit using the RuPay credit card or what do you call the RuPay credit card on UPI. The other part which we are looking at is some of the low ticket transactions. How do we grow the more efficient way than going back and debiting or going back to the bank? So UPI Lite is what we have designed. So how do we grow that? Because when we go to 10x volume from where we are, we need to process it very efficiently, right? Because I think today the transaction processing cost in India for all parties put together, even at the scale of UPI, would be in the range of 80 to 1 rupee, 80 paisa to 1 rupee, right? Which is a very quite large cost because the transaction travels all the way there. So I think there has to be some method to process low ticket very efficiently. So I think these are some of the things which we are working on.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, so one pointer from my side. Normally, when you talk to a fintech founder, they're passionate about their products, right? And when I spoke to Anjani last week, and he was so passionate about the new product they have built, I could almost see the gleam in his eyes, or that yaar ye to kyun dekh lo, naya product dekho, version dekho, and the kind of follow up and discussions we had was amazing. So I think they are actually becoming more like a fintech as such, right, in terms of customer experience. So if you guys will do it, what fintechs do. So I want to know from your perspective what the bank's journey is on the digital side, and what are new experiences the bank is building right now.
So from bank's perspective, we want to be more attuned to servicing our customers, and this customer wants to bank 24/7 anytime. We launched an instant car loan journey, and I was surprised that between 12 at night to 6 in the morning, who are these people who are taking car loans? I mean, can you believe that? Yeah. So this is the kind of now we are living in an age where banking has to be 24/7. It has to be always available and instant. And there is no downtime available, like, banking hours, there's no need for that. So we have to get attuned to that and ensure that our bank is available digitally, always, everywhere, for any customer in the country. And that's what we are trying through our new experiences. So we are looking at our call center where you can call. You mentioned about 12 languages. So you can speak in Hindi what you want. You want a bank statement about or interest statement, and you will get a response. You will get it immediately on your phone. You can come on to the new app that we are talking about, payment app. And I must confess that banks were late in coming to the party on UPI. Banks always thought that there are better ways of doing transaction for good, bad, ugly reasons. We've now realized that we have to be a part of that party. So all the banks are working towards also improving their experience on UPI, growing it. It's essentially how do we make our life easy for our customer, leveraging whatever is available across, whether it is on service side, acquisition side, transaction side, everywhere. So that's where we are also looking at growing.
And given you, a lot of thoughts are about इसमें पैसा नहीं बनेगा, but as a bank, when you build it, what is in it for the bank itself to build these journeys and products?
Yeah. So this is a fundamental dichotomy, and I keep saying, and we are now seeing across the world, a digital business is built on the enterprise, on the premises that you improve the customer experience, let customers come, don't worry about what is the breakage over there in terms of cost, etc. At some point of time, we'll find a way to monetize that customer. Now this, thankfully in India, and I was referring to that third trend, that the roles definition are being aligned very clearly. India is taking a clear stance that data belongs to the citizen of this country.
Correct.
It does not belong to any entity, whosoever is getting that person. So in that case, the data is now available digitally with the consent of the customer, and it's available for anybody to monetize or not monetize, but it has to be done within that framework. So as a bank, we are regulated entities. We have some products that we manufacture as well. So we can leverage the same thing, and so can fintechs actually. If anybody wants to monetize that data, there is no saying that the customer belongs to me, or just because it came on your shopping app, all the customer data belongs to you. That is no more the reality, at least in India. And the more we get into it, the more important it will become, this framework. And that is why we are seeing a lot of technology companies who used to just monetize the eyeballs, etc. They have to think harder on how to get consent of the customer and monetize it. That is one place where I think regulated entities and the non-regulated entities who want to monetize will have to work in a safe framework.
But why are you saying that he can't? He's going to compete with fintech, so
Yeah, looks like.
so so it's good actually.
No,
The
it's good.
banks
I'm
are-
very happy about it. I think that's how I always thought that all banks are fintechs. They're just not realizing it. There's no choice we all have, right? I think finally customer experience. I mean, it's like D2H versus how many of you will have building ke chat pe chhatri? We still have that, or we are using this typical Hotstar and other stuff? You have connection right now? आपके पास cable वगैरह है किसी के पास? Everybody lost it, right? COVID में सबका चला गया, right? Everybody is on digital. So if we don't compete, suddenly on next day we are not, don't exist.
But
Yeah.
only one thing which I would like to add is there has to be a basic business model, which is a
100%.
cost plus business model in every activity, right? Because the moment the business models are built to leverage something else, I think there are a lot of unintended consequences of that approach. So I think whatever we do, every activity should have its own business model. I think that's a golden principle as a country we should adopt while we continue to grow this fintech revolution.
No, I agree. I think we meet a lot of people early stage. We're saying we have no model. बाद में देख लेंगे. I think our view is only that पैसा देख लो. Finally, if you don't get the loop in, you will actually lose all your whatever savings you have, and maybe customer experience will go. Suddenly, you are off, right, off the table. So I think it will work beautifully because you already have the model and you know how to build it. So I think that's good. I think coming to MSMEs segment, which is where you run it. So interestingly, I was in Agra and I've never spoken about this. Then I went to Agra and I was meeting somebody who does import and export business and was looking at credit. I think Credable name came there that in Agra, that guy was saying, yeah, Credable के साथ काम करते हैं. वो लोग अच्छा काम करते हैं. They had only two names. Other guy I'm not telling in this forum right now, but both are startups, right? I think your reach has been good. Maybe quick perspective from your side is that कोविड में एमएसएमई सेगमेंट का बहुत हिसाब खराब हुआ बिकॉज लॉजिकल रीजंस, राइट? सब सेटअप ही बंद हो गया तो बिजनेस कैसे होगा? बट उसके बाद से हाउ हैव यू सीन प्रोग्रेस हैपनिंग एंड हाउ दिस सेगमेंट व्हिच इज मोस्ट क्रूशियल फॉर द कंट्री? आई थिंक while retail looks great, but I think MSME, if they get credit, is much better, right, from an impact perspective. How do you see this segment growing and you're leading, so your thought process will be very, very useful.
I mean, I think if you look at sheer numbers, right, the MSME represents the single largest business community in the country and contributes significantly to the GDP. If you look at credit, the NPAs on MSMEs stood at, I think, about 12.8% as of March 22. Now, primarily these NPAs are driven because there is a, working capital gap or delayed payments which cause MSMEs to go out of business or, render them unable to fulfill on their financial commitments. And I think what incumbent fintechs and non-banking financial institutions are doing is to democratize the way credit can be given to these MSMEs. And that's opening up a whole, plethora of opportunities for them to grow. And for that to contribute towards the spike in GDP that we are all hoping to see. So that's one. The second, I think, traditionally MSMEs have always been on the fringe of digital adoption, right? But the pandemic changed all of that. 93% growth in payments just in the last 2 years. And largely driven, I mean, just look at it. Everybody on the street, any vendor, any business accepts digital payments now. And that is phenomenal. I mean, hats off to NPCI and the government to make that happen. And that is creating a lot of credit and lending opportunities for players like us and other institutions, including banks. And what Anjani said is fascinating, right? I mean, for a bank to start thinking that I'm going to go and give a vegetable vendor money at night and collect it back in the morning is revolutionary. And I think that is the future of what, if we can enable that to happen, just imagine how you would change the landscape of MSMEs in India. I reiterate, I mean, globalization of the India stack is very, very exciting. I think as the India stack progresses, and we will speak a little more about Open and ONDC in a short while, but I think those initiatives will drive significant growth uh, to MSMEs, and as long as fintechs can play a part in that growth responsibly, I think that's a great value creator, both for us as well as small businesses.
You can actually talk a bit about ONDC impact as well, right? Because a lot of people, I mean, there's a session later in the day as well on ONDC, but maybe a good quick perspective will be good.
I mean, I think what ONDC intends to do is fantastic, like democratize, commerce for small businesses and do away with platform-centric monopolies. I think that's a phenomenal initiative. Of course, it needs to scale, it needs to play out, but that married with Open, creates tremendous opportunities for both, commerce as well as credit to be available to a wide audience of small businesses, which would, again, in my view, become a serious game changer going forward.
Thank you. One point from my perspective is that it's generally you'll see that initial phase of 2013-14 was all about young guys building startups and all. But I think the current age is about guys with a lot of experience building large startups. I think this is what will happen more because the areas which are left to be solved are actually complicated. Secured lending is another area where it's complicated. So you will see, I think that 30 above 30 and 20 above 20 kind of stuff is gone. I think in this area you will need 40 above 40 to sort of succeed. So I think and he started building Vastu, I think 6-7 years back or more. 7 years, right? And I know in those places where they had raised a lot of funds, but I went to their office, it was really plain, and the way they're approaching the activity was very plain. So the work you've done is fab. So thoda bataiye ki secured lending mein kaise, how do you build a scale and digitalization there, and how to enable customer onboarding faster, better, sharper?
So Samit, the way when I started on this journey in 2014. It actually took us 2 years. There was no regulator in housing at that time. So we had to buy a small company, go to a few of my old bosses and tell them, give me some money, and essentially figure out a way to get the story going. So it took us 1.5 years, 2 years to get change of ownership and control. So during that time, we actually, if I were to say, had a late movers advantage of starting in 2016 to lend. So we knew that what's worked for a lot of people may work for us for some more time, but will not always work. So we took some strategic calls. We said, we will raise large amounts of capital if we can. We were fortunate. Along with that, we said we'll build all our technology, all our data science, and all our analytics ourselves. And our approach was that from a secured lender's perspective, historically what's happened is you go to the smaller towns in India, very small ticket sizes, very high operating expenses, lots of operational risk, credit risk. You create 50, 100 crore portfolios or even smaller. Then you lose some people, have some fraud, and then you decide as a bank or a lender that we don't want to do more of this. So we said we will expand our presence to say 75 or 80% of the revenue pool of mortgage lending in India and be there for a few years, learn from those markets and build products and delivery models according to that. So that's something that we've done, I think, reasonably well. But the way the ecosystems evolved for secured lending, if you look at typical bank structures or NBFC structures, and you have many supervisors on top of supervisors. So the actual people who deal with the customers and engage are very limited. And today you have an opportunity to not have, you'll have companies with 6,000 people, 7,000 people, 5,000 people. But the opportunity is to unwind. So if you were to actually walk in today, you wouldn't need all those people. So you could actually, with the ability to leverage technology, one is technology for operations, technology or digitization for process, control, risk management, analytics. And the other part of technology is to put the customer at the center and make sure that you deliver a product to the customer that is WOW. And I think that's what HDFC Bank, you said on the 1-minute car loan product. I think that's something that's really, really game changing. So if imagine that today with all the digitized land records, all the railroads on the ecosystem on digital that's happening. You can get a secured loan pretty much on the phone like you're buying something on Amazon. And there'll be a few people who will actually do it. And the partnership ecosystem in India today and the enabling regulations and the fact that the customer owns the data and you take consent and operate in a way will actually enable you to take a lot of cost out of this and also pass on to the customers. So that the difference between a home loan for a prime customer at 8.2% to a near prime customer or whatever you want to call them because he's self-employed, but equally good in a smaller town at 11.5%, 12% will come down. So I think being fit for growth, being focused on OPEX and making sure that you take cost out, are able to transfer, and also understand that you build a business in lending, any lending, secured or unsecured, where you believe that there is no arbitrage that's going to be left for a NBFI. And you got to pretty much have the compliances and the checks and balances of a bank. And many banks, historically in India, the Indian banking ecosystem, some part of it is like managing a public utility with all the compliances and all the other challenges. So it's important for people like us to find our moats in terms of saying that this is my right to win. It may not be price. It could be delivery models, it could be partnerships, it could be customer ownership, it could be risk management or execution. So that's the way we have approached it. And I think we've been fortunate to do reasonably okay.
Not reasonably, more than that, I guess. So fantastic. So I think, Rahul, from your perspective, in the current context, what should be the approach, and there are a lot of founders in the room as well, what should be the approach of a founder right now who's just starting or thinking about it? What should be his approach for building a scalable model for a long term, right? Because वो थोड़ा fashionable नहीं है अभी. It's more about grunt work. So what should be the approach?
Yeah. So, look, there's, like I said, you said, you know, it used to be sexy to be an entrepreneur in your 20s, but actually probably in fintech, it's probably wiser to become an entrepreneur in your 40s. If we zoom out for a minute and you look at the prospects for India relative to the world, I think this is important to recognize there's very few parts of the world that have this kind of secular growth in it. So one, we'll go from roughly a 3 trillion economy to a 10 trillion economy in the next 10 years. We're going to double GDP per capita in that period as well. This is usually called the golden decade because that golden decade, you know, incomes double and the bulk of that goes into consumption. So as you think about consumption related expenses, you also think about the penetration of credit also goes up, right? So you've got consumption going up, credit opportunities going up, but you've also then got lifestyle choices, right? So people were in the past not worried about the cost of healthcare because healthcare was fairly affordable, but as lifestyle diseases go up, healthcare costs go up, insurance becomes important, right? So you start to think about the mega trend around what is changing in people's lifestyle. India has probably the highest incidence of diabetes in the world right now. So if you're not thinking about health insurance, you should think about health insurance. All these young people are coming into money. They may or may not be spending all of it. Thanks to BNPL, probably they're not spending all of it. But they're starting to think about investing, right? So how do you think about this new population growth and income growth and channeling that into investment ideas and investment strategies and onboarding people who otherwise would have thought about savings first and now thinking investing first, right? So that's another dimension of it. So I think the truth is India is full of opportunity. As a founder, I think you have to ask yourself, what is my unfair advantage in any space that I'm going after? Do I have a deeper understanding of it? Do I have a deeper access in it? Do I have some preferred knowledge, right? So it starts with a deep understanding either a customer or some unfair advantage as you think about it. But taking the long view to say, if I'm building something over the next 10 years, I should really tap into these mega trends versus something that's maybe hot this year.
Fantastic, fantastic. आप इतना सोच कैसे लेते हैं? I think I can't figure out that structure of thinking like this, right? कि आप बड़े हो जाओगे, rich होगे, तो आप बीमार हो जाओगे. This is good, interesting. So maybe time for a few questions from the group here. Yeah. Any question from the group here?
Hi. My question was pretty much around what Rahul spoke last, right? So if you look at Gen Z, people who are coming into money now, right? And this is probably to the wider fintech forum itself, but maybe more specifically to wealth management as a space, right? On one side, we're talking about fintech building solutions which are predominantly tech-based. But there is also a school of thought wherein Gen Z people especially are looking at a personal touch when it comes to especially wealth management and a lot of other things too. I think tech was a new thing to millennials or the previous generation, but the Gen Z, they were born with tech, right? So it doesn't excite them per se. So especially in the field of wealth management, there is a very popular school of thought that Gen Z is looking for a very personal touch. So how do we balance this? On one side, you've got fintech, which is probably something which can cater to the wider space of the customer segment that we're looking at. Vis-a-vis, we're looking at Gen Z, which is, where the ball game might be a little different.
Sure. And I think, obviously thanks to COVID, a lot of people that had extra time on their hand were also getting into the markets, particularly in urban India. But I think for a lot of people who are beginning their investing journey, it's actually quite hard to start, right? So you're saying they understand tech, but they don't necessarily understand investing. So I think one needs to break it down probably into 3 life stages. In your 20s, when you're single, in your 30s, when you're married, and in your 40s, maybe when you have kids. And your priorities change, right? And you move from maybe I'll do it myself to do it for me, right? So I think we think about the opportunities in investing, straddling these different life stages and different kinds of experiences that consumers want. So equally, we're looking at companies that begin by just financial literacy and starting gamification of investing at the one extreme, to somebody like a Scriptbox that's actually aggregating multiple subscale wealth managers who are still in the do it for me, but putting more technology into it. So I think it's a large market. I don't think there's necessarily one approach. Identify which stage of life you're dealing with and probably build products and services to that segment of market.
Thanks.
Time for maybe a couple of more questions, please. And the next one can raise your hand up so that we are on time, so that we can reach you faster. Anybody else has a question? No? So then this is 2.
Hello. Thank you, Samir, for giving this opportunity. The regulator has been thinking about or wanting to have an alternate to NPCI.
Your voice is a bit feeble. Can you be closer?
Hello. Yeah, I think it's audible now. Yeah, the regulator has been thinking about bringing an alternative to NPCI for quite some time. I think their last effort didn't yield. The question in relation to the subject is that what is it that those who are wanting to have that alternate thinking about this, and the one who is already there, what he is thinking about it, and the third is whether that alternate is going to be giving any impetus to the future of fintech.
I think the question is that when RBI was looking for NPCI's alternatives, which is that umbrella, what was NUE, what was the new players thinking? What were you thinking? Something like that, right? Yeah.
I have no time to think, I just work. So I think it's a wrong question. The question should be to RBI.
I think this is fair because I have not seen a more hardworking person than Dilip.
No, I was just kidding.
Yeah, but it's fact, right? Because I think the kind of work these guys have done is fab. So I think the new player has to think what they have to do, right? I think they have to do what they have to do, and it's there on the edge, right? So, you want to take it? He still wants to give a response. The same question that what NPCI is thinking, you're leaving it.
Yeah. So I said
not only NPCI, but those who are wanting to have that alternate. I think HDFC was keenly pursuing for that.
The question is for
and also. And also, I mean, not necessarily to be taken in the, competitive spirit, but as probably an accelerator to the future of fintech. Do you, I mean, all of you gentlemen sitting there are seeing this, that if that alternative comes in, and Dilip was talking about, he's wanting to have 10x. So a supplement to what he's doing, if that thing comes up, will it give a kind of acceleration to the overall efforts of payments?
So I'll take that question, and my perspective is very simple. NPCI is solving the problems for retail. I think the missing angle in the country are twofold, which nobody realizes, nobody talks about. I think we need a new corporate payment framework. We have RTGS and NEFT, which were as old as 20-year-old. I literally started career with them. that they have remained the same. They don't have a collection framework. They are very expensive. So ask any corporate guy and who has to make collections of, let's say, 5 crore, 10 crore, 2 lakh. He does not know. So many of you have paid, or let's say directly to my account. I can't figure out who has paid. So I think the corporate payment in India is in real shambles. Real shambles, okay? It doesn't exist literally. We are still in dark age. So that is where space, I think something has to be built both for payment and collections on the corporate side and also on the credit side. We still are waiting for National Lending Corporation of India to get created. We don't have a framework. So you think about it, TREDS is worked because there's structure to it. We have credit card, which is a credit product, which works beautifully because there are networks which are regulated for that. But for lending, we have nothing, right? So I think we have been pushing all while to get NLCI in India, National Lending Corporation of India. Name can be anything, right? I'm just trying to put a name. So I think lending cycle structure is what we need to solve for. And once we solve for it, amazing stuff will happen because this current challenge that who's regulated, who has no regulation, what is controlled, I think network will do it. So I think these two areas are what we need to focus on rather than focusing on adding one more, which is, it is right now doing really well. So that's my perspective, but we'll pause now. And I know I'm reaching time. I think we are 1 minute off. With this, we thank the entire panel for joining us. I think I was nervous, aap aayenge ki nahi aayenge, and I was nervous that I will be able to manage this, this panel. So thank you for joining, and thank you for all coming across. I think full crowd is fabulous. Thank you guys, thank you.